Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy T for 365 Horror, and this is a horror movie discovery channel. I am just here to put as many horror movies on your watch list as possible. And in today's video, we are going to go over every single movie I watched in May and June. And we're going to get into it right now. Now, we are going to get into the video, but before we do, I've got to remind you guys to please like and subscribe if you like this video. Also, this video is definitely best watched with a movie tracker. I like to use Letterboxd. It's just the easiest way to keep track of the movies that you've seen and want to see. Now, before we get into every movie I watched, I did want to go over a couple quick topics, and the first one's going to be the format of the video. Some people in the comments on the last one, which was a couple months ago, I know I missed last month, I'm sorry about that, but some people did comment that they didn't really have enough context for the movie, or they weren't exactly sure where they could watch the movies and whatnot. So what I've done this time is I am going to include the synopsis for the movie, as well as where you could watch it. Now, depending on the date you're watching this video, please keep in mind that the actual location to watch these movies, they change all the time. That's why you can see behind me, I do like physical media because I don't like it when streaming services take off movies I love. I want to watch what I want to watch when I want to watch it. So that's just a quick heads up. If I say that this one's on Shudder, that could be today. They could lose the license tomorrow. That happens on a lot of streaming services. So if you go to see the movie and it's not there anymore, maybe leave that in the comments if you're watching this movie at a later date. Help us all kind of watch new movies. Maybe I'll even go in and have like a sticky on the post where I can update, like if movies have changed services, or if someone finds a good new place to watch a movie, I can kind of update it in the comments. So that is one thing that we'll do for sure. Now, the next topic I wanted to cover was the stop motion imaginary debacle or boondoggle, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. The controversy over what I gave those two movies. And so I'm going to go back. I do agree. And as I even recorded that video, it's funny because I knew those movies got a same score, and it just so happened that I was going to do them back to back. And in my heart, I knew that I was probably going to get dragged for that. But I just wanted to stand behind my convictions, man. Like, that's what I scored the movie at the time. You know what I mean? Whether it was a mood or anything, that's what I gave it. So I was going to stand behind it. So I was going to stand behind it, and I just wanted to see like what people would say. And I definitely got a little bit called out for that one, and deservedly. If I had to go back, I would lower Imaginary to about a 6, maybe a 5.5, but I really did kind of enjoy the movie, so I don't think it's worth like a 4 or a 3. But I would raise stop motion up to a 7, mostly because of the ending, and it kind of did stick with me, and it stuck with me longer than I thought. Like, I find myself kind of thinking about that ending. I don't know exactly why it kind of had the impact it did on me, but I don't know, just something about something about that just being your reality. I don't know, I don't want to give away anything, but for some reason the ending was poignant to me, and I'm sure there's people who watched it and were like, yo, the ending was all right. Like, I didn't find it like super good, just the theme behind it, I was just like, damn. So I would go back and do that. But the other thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about two little things. First one is, I don't know how people gave Imaginary like a 3. Like, I've watched 3s, but maybe it's because I just watch a lot of random movies. So I've seen terrible movies. Like, I agree that movie wasn't like the most unique or anything, but it was okay. It had some okay jump scares. Me and my girl watched it late at night. We kind of were in the mood to watch it. We like darked everything out, and a couple of the jump scares were effective. The story was, I get it, you know, it wasn't exactly masterclass performances, but it was watchable. I don't think that movie is worth like a 3 or a 4. That's just me. I totally get it if you call it 5. It's middle of the road. The production was competent. It did make sense. It had a couple of good moments. It had some creeps, a couple jump scares. I don't think the movie was worth that. That's my opinion. Sticking to it. I'm sorry. But the next topic I kind of wanted to cover that goes with that is sometimes I feel like you get certain scores with movies because there's the mood you set and there's the mood you're in. And I find that those really will kind of contribute to how you feel about a movie. Like, take for instance a comedy horror. Like, I don't really like comedy horror, so if I'm not in the mood to watch it and that's the movie that like my girl picked, and you know, like, I don't pick all, like, hey man, she's good enough to always be willing to pick a horror movie. So if she kind of wants to pick off a beaten path every once in a while, I let that happen. Like, I'm not trying to dictate what we watch. But if I'm not in the mood for it, there is a very good chance that unless it is an amazing comedy horror, that it's just not going to hit me right, because I just didn't feel like watching it. So that's the first part I wanted to cover about why Imaginary got the score it did, because we were just kind of in the mood to be scared and creeped out and really set the setting. And that's the next thing I really want to talk about, and that is the mood you set. I just want to say, like, because a lot of people are like, I'll talk about a movie and then people are like, that wasn't scary at all. And sometimes I wonder, like, how did you watch this movie? Like, I'm not saying that everything's scary. Things don't have to be scary to everyone. For an example, I don't find Home Invasion scary. Some people think The Strangers 2009 Part 1 is a complete masterpiece. I thought it was all right because that just wasn't a trigger for me, man. I'm a big black dude. I got weapons. Like, you break in. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's me being bravado. Someone could shoot me and that'd be the end. But I already know for a fact that my fight or flight is high and I'm ready. Like, yo, let's do it. If you want to break in, man, I got a lot of weight, bring it down on you. Like, hey, man, I'm not afraid. So those movies might not hit me as much as like a single woman who's living. And I don't mean because they're weaker or anything. So please don't go to there. But I'm just saying that, you know, 100-pound person living alone in a basement suite might feel different about a movie like The Strangers, or you know, there's just different moods to set. So if you are finding that nothing ever creeps you out or scares you, maybe you're a soldier, and that's great. Like, maybe you're just like, yo man, nothing scares me. I'll sleep in a cemetery after watching whatever. Like, good for you. I feel a little bad because, I mean, a big part of horror movies is me being afraid. So I do feel like, unfortunately, I feel when sometimes I have a little bit of a higher tolerance because of body size and stuff for alcohol. And sometimes I actually feel envious when you tell me you get drunk off 2 beers. Like, as much as they're kind of, that's bad for them because they're like, I'm such a lightweight. I'm like, yeah, but if the point is to get a little bit fake. Sorry, someone came in and it totally threw me off for a second there. So if this seems a little bit disjointed, I do apologize. But that kind of setting of the mood really matters. You know what I mean? Like, it really kind of gets you in the frame of being scared. So if you're having, oh, that's what I was saying. Sorry about that. Let me just get back on my train. That really did throw me off. Yeah, so I actually feel bad when somebody tells me that they're a cheap drunk, even though they're kind of disparaging about it. Like, I'm a lightweight, I'm a pussy or whatever. Well, I'm kind of like, I wish I kind of got drunk off 2 beers. You know what I mean? That would be really price effective. So even though I know it's like, hey, I don't get scared off nothing, I kind of feel bad because that's the point of the horror movies. I want to be creeped out and scared. So while I do agree that you're hardcore, maybe nothing scares you, I don't know, man. Maybe open up your imagination a little bit, because that's kind of the point, for me at least, that I want to be creeped out and scared. If you do find that you're having trouble doing that, kind of look at the mood you're setting. Like, I always try to turn the lights off, make it dark, you know, chill out. But if you're just like watching a movie in the middle of the day while kids are playing outside and your Nana's making banana bread in the kitchen while listening to her favorite Eric Estrada song, and your brother's on the floor in front of you playing with his dinky cars, like, the movie's not going to hit or be as scary as it could be, right? So sometimes I'm just going to say, you know, if you're finding that you're starting to just be completely desensitized, maybe change up your mood. You know what I mean? Maybe if you get nervous, like, I know that if I was by myself, I'm not really trying to go into my basement and watch movies. I know you're like, dude, you're a kid, but I just have an active imagination. I will think things are all around me, man. Like, I don't know. I'll just hear things. Like, it just creeps me out. So if you are finding that, just remember with some of the scores that I give, maybe I set a different mood than you set. Maybe you were in a different mood. Maybe you weren't receptive for scares that night. So that's just what I want to say. And that's why I find a lot of this stuff subjective, and why I try not to disparage or put down what other people like, because maybe I'm just not receiving it like they are. That was a super long rant. That is longer than most of the rants I go on. I just wanted to say that because, man, I got dragged from my movie choices. That hurts. No, I'm just kidding. Everybody has their own tastes. I'm sure when it comes down to Hereditary, you're going to tell people going to tell me the movie's trash and boring. I didn't get that. I love the movie. So, hey, man, that's the great part about it. Everybody has their own mind, their own preferences. And the good part about that is movies that didn't initially look good to me, sometimes later on somebody will be like, what? That was an amazing movie. I'll go back and watch it. And it's like I kind of missed out just because that first impression wasn't as strong as I would have liked it to be. But I let somebody else kind of give me their opinion and help me choose something good. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Enough rambling. Let's get into every single movie I watched in May and June. So the first movie I watched was a 2023 straight horror called Bag of Lies, and you can check this movie on VOD Digital. Let's get into the synopsis. Desperate to save his dying wife, Matt turns to the bag, an ancient relic with dark magic. The cure demands a chilling ritual and strict rules. As his wife heals, Matt's sanity unravels, facing terrifying consequences. Now, the final score I gave this movie was a 5 out of 10, and here's what I thought. Bag of Lies is a meh movie. It felt like everything it tried to do was executed on either a mid or poor level. It lacked scares, and although they did weirdly build a bit of creep, it was hampered by bad acting a lot of the time. What kept the movie mid to me was I did like the premise, and there were times that I genuinely felt some creepiness in some of the bag scenes. I also liked the mystery it built, and it did keep me questioning of its exact direction. I just wanted to like where the movie ended up more. The next movie I watched was a 2023 horror thriller by the name of New Life, and you can check this one on VOD Digital. Here's the plot. A mysterious woman on the run, and the resourceful fixer assigned to bring her in. Their two unique stories inextricably linked, as the stakes of the pursuit rise to apocalyptic proportions. Now, I thought this movie was pretty good, and I ended up giving it a 7 out of 10, but here's what I thought. New Life is a good film with a lot of good elements. It builds some great tension and has a quick start. The characters were played well, and it felt like their situations had weight. The premise was great, and the story built good mystery while it was revealed to the audience little by little through a sequence of time jumps back and forth. The way the scenario plays out feels like it has some good reality behind it. And even the ending was effective in building a good level of dread. The pacing was good, albeit a tad slow at parts, but overall, a good film. The next movie I watched was a 2012 drama horror thriller movie named Found, and you can check this one on Tubi and VOD Digital. Let's get into the synopsis. A horror-obsessed boy discovers his older brother is a serial killer. I thought this was a good dark movie, and I gave it a 7 out of 10. Here's what I thought. Found is a pretty dark and disturbing film, and definitely will stick with me for a while. The movie even has a dark start and lets you know the type of ride you're in for from the beginning. It creates this mood culminating in quite a dark ending. The only thing holding this movie back from being a great disturbing watch is that the acting is for surely questionable, but I promise you by the end it won't matter, especially if you're into a more gritty, dark, and disturbing material. This movie stuck with me, and even though it lacked in any real creeps or scares, I definitely needed some eye bleach once it was done. I don't know if I'd call this a classic, but it's most def unsettling. And even through the horrible acting performances, this movie belongs in my collection. The next movie I watched was a 2023 straight horror called Infested, and you could check this movie out on Shudder and VOD Digital. Residents of a rundown French apartment building battle against an army of deadly, rapidly reproducing spiders. Now, I actually thought this movie was quite good, and I gave it a 7 out of 10. And I will say that if you were triggered by like creepy crawlies, this movie could even be a 7.5. Here's what I thought. Infested is a good movie that will leave you with the creepy crawlies. The acting and production was good, and I liked that it had a quick start. You definitely get creepy crawlies from the jump. Now, you don't get traditional creeps and scares in this one, but I gave it a decent scare score because the way the spiders move and some of the jump scares in this one were pretty good. Now, I hate spiders and bugs, so it may have affected me more in that department, but damn. Also, when it came to creeps in this movie, although I wasn't overly scared going into the basement or anything, which, I mean, I was at least weary of all the spiders and bugs in my vicinity, at least for a few days. This is the type of movie that had me checking my shoes for a bit. I don't know if you remember, I can't remember if it was like a horror movie or an action movie, but there's a part where like a spider or something gets in the guy's shoe and then he puts it on and it bites him and then later he dies and is caught. So I always since then have had a little bit of a like kind of scare about bugs in my shoe. So I definitely checked my shoes for a couple days after this movie. Finally, I did think the spiders look good and you do get some good animal horror moments in this one. Next movie I watched was a 2022 drama horror thriller by the name of Speak No Evil, and you can check this one on Shudder or AMC+. Let's get into the plot. A Danish family visits a Dutch family they met on holiday. What was supposed to be an idyllic weekend slowly starts unraveling as the Danes try to stay polite in the face of unpleasantness. Now, the final score I did end up giving this movie was a 7.5. I thought it was a good to great movie, and here's what I thought. Speak No Evil is a good to great horror flick. Even though you don't get the high-octane scares in this one, you get a great film filled with palpable tension and great awkward character interactions. Even though you don't get that creepy in a traditional sense, there's plenty of creepy that you'll feel by the end of this movie. Finally, the music in Speak No Evil is big and foreboding at times, and just ushers this feeling of dread that sets up this movie perfectly. Wrap that up with a good dark ending, and you've got yourself a great horror film. Next, we're going to take a look at a 2024 horror thriller called Abigail, and this one's available on VOD Digital. Let's get into the plot. After a group of criminals kidnap the ballerina daughter of a powerful underworld figure, they retreat into an isolated mansion, unaware that they're locked inside with no normal little girl. Now, I thought this movie was decent to good. I could give it a 6 or a 6.5. I did think it was okay, and here's what I thought. Abigail is a decent vampire movie. It has a good cast, and I liked the premise, and they played together well. Although I thought Abigail was a good character, I do think that it would have been effective if her being a vampire had been hidden from us as the audience, as it was from the characters. If you could have found out with the characters, I do think this movie would have been bumped up like a point, maybe not 2, but it would have been at least bumped up a point because it would have just been brilliant. You would have just had no clue, but they really did give most of it away in the trailer. In the end, I did find that this movie got very heavy-handed with the vampire parts, but all in all, it was decent and worth a watch. The next movie I watched was a 2023 straight horror called Where the Devil Roams, and this one's available on VOD Digital. Let's get into the plot. This story traces a family of murderous sideshow performers as it travels around the world on the dying carnival circuit. Now, I thought this movie was decent to good. It was pretty dark, and I did end up giving it a 6.5. Here's what I thought. Where the Devil Roams is a decent, dark, macabre horror. It's a slow burn overall, but it has a good, dark opening that readies you for what's ahead. I enjoyed the gloomy tale, and you just know the story about dismemberment is going to be filled with a good amount of blood and gore. Now be warned, this movie is a bit of a slow burn, and its weird overtone just edges this one into an art house style horror movie. If you aren't really into that, unfortunately, I'd call this movie a 5.5. But if you are into it, I'd suggest giving it a watch. The next movie I watched was a 2023 horror thriller called You'll Never Find Me, and this movie is available on Shudder, AMC+, and VOD Digital. Here's the plot. Patrick, a strange and lonely resident, lives in a mobile home at the back of an isolated trailer park. After a violent storm, a mysterious young woman appears at his door seeking shelter from the elements. Now, this movie wasn't bad. I was decent to good, and I ended up giving it a 6.5, and here's my review. You'll Never Find Me is a decent to good movie that does a great job of building good tension. The dialogue is great, and the conversations are tense. Now, you won't exactly get creeps and scares out of this one, but you do get a good mystery built from the outset. You get good dialogue and a good, albeit somewhat predictable story. One thing that can really hold this movie back is it is a bit of a slower burn, sometimes even a bit too slow. You have to be ready for quite a few soliloquy monologues, but if you can get through that, it does have a decent ending. The next movie I watched was a 2024 horror sci-fi thriller by the name of Sting, and it's available on VOD Digital. Here's the plot. After raising an unnervingly talented spider in secret, 12-year-old Charlotte must face the facts about her pet and fight for her family's survival when the once charming creature rapidly transforms into a giant flesh-eating monster. Now, I thought this movie was just meh and middle of the road, and I kind of wanted some more out of it, so I only could give this one a 5.5, but here's my review. Sting for me was a meh movie. At first, the film starts out with this almost kiddie feel, and only redeems a bit of its maturity in the second half when we get some decent gore. If you're a fan of the creepy crawly like me, it may be decent, but it isn't nearly as effective as, say, a movie like Infested. It kind of had a lot of cheesy moments, especially some of the conflict resolutions. This movie is worth a watch if you have nothing else, but I do have to give a full disclosure, I did think I felt something crawling on my arm while I was watching this movie. Now, the next movie I watched was a 2016 crime horror thriller called Don't Breathe, and it's available on Netflix and VOD digital. Here's the plot. Hoping to walk away with a massive fortune, a trio of thieves break into a house of a blind man who isn't as helpless as he seems. Now, this is almost a classic film that I thought was really good. It really ratcheted up the tension, and I gave it a 7.5. Here's my review. Don't Breathe is a great movie. Although it doesn't have creeps and scares, the tension in the situations is pure anxiety fuel. It's really effective with great close calls. It's well acted and the plot is great. The progression of the film gives way to new parts of the story that you didn't really expect. It's got a good pace and it doesn't really let up all the way through. I'd recommend this movie as a watch for sure, and it's a movie I'd like to own. Next, I kept in the same vein and I watched a 2021 action crime horror Don't Breathe Part 2, and it's available on Netflix and VOD digital. Here's the plot. The sequel is set in the years following the initial deadly home invasion, where Norman Nordstrom lives in quiet solace until his past sins catch up to him. Now, I found this movie was decent to good, but I didn't find it as effective as Part 1, so I only gave it a 6.5. Here's my review. Don't Breathe 2 is a good sequel, but not as effective as Part 1. It has a good, dark, diabolical story that somehow makes you sympathetic to the blind man, and I found that well done in the story. The tension wasn't really as good as Part 1, and I think they made a couple of eye-rolly stretches just to kind of push the plot forward. Overall, this movie was a decent sequel. The next movie I watched was a 2020 horror mystery thriller called The Night House, and this one is available on Disney Plus and VOD digital. Here's the plot. A widow begins to uncover her recently deceased husband's disturbing secrets. Now, I thought this movie was actually good. The story shined and it had a really good mystery, so I gave it a 7 out of 10. Here's my review. The Night House is a good creepy horror that builds a great mystery with its story. Weirdly, it's a bit of a slow burn, but Def has some good creeps and scares. The mystery is good and engaging and kept us guessing throughout a good part of the film. If you want a good mystery, check it out. The next movie I watched was a 2020 drama horror called My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To, and it's available on Prime Video and VOD digital. Here's the plot. Two mysterious siblings find themselves at odds over the care of their frail and sickly young brother. Now, I found this movie to be a decently dark story, but I did want more of it, and I could only give it a 6 out of 10. Here's my review. My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To is a decent to good macabre dark story. This movie is a traditional drama slow burn, so you might not enjoy it if you're in the mood for high-octane creeps and scares. But what is here is a bleak story, well acted with good performances. There's also tons of characters having inner conflictions in this movie, and it's actually played quite well. Plus, it's a pretty unconventional take on the genre being portrayed in the film, so if you're in the mood for a slower, bleak drama horror, make sure to check this one out. The next movie I watched was a 2008 drama horror called Let the Right One In, and this movie is available on VOD digital. Here's the plot. Oscar, an overlooked and bullied boy, finds love and revenge through Eli, a beautiful but peculiar girl. Now, I've got to be honest that they have done a remake to this movie called Let Me In, but this original Let the Right One In is a great movie, and I gave it an 8 out of 10. Here's my review. Let the Right One In is a great story-driven vampire drama horror. Even though the movie is quite a slow burn, it still delivers this constant disturbing overtone from the killings to the unusual relationships and their dynamics. The child acting is decent from the boy, but it's masterful from the girl. The way she's able to embody somebody older is great, and the child relationship that they create is awkward and disturbing. This unique story holds up for sure and is a must-watch, and I do already own the movie in my collection. The next movie I watched was a 2024 straight horror called The First Omen, and this one's available on VOD digital. Here's the plot. A young American woman is sent to Rome to begin a life of service to the church, but encounters a darkness that causes her to question her faith and uncovers a terrifying conspiracy that hopes to bring about the birth of an evil incarnate. Now, I thought this movie was a good, dark, kind of religious movie. I know some people are sick of those, but I actually enjoyed this movie, and I did give it a 7 out of 10. Here's my review. The First Omen is a good prequel for the franchise. The production and budget is top-notch, and with its music, it sets a good tone for this dark and gritty story. It has some decent creeps and scares, and just the right amount of gore that most def made me wince here and there. I also really like the way they set up the Omen Part 1, and all in all, I did think this was a good film. Now, the next movie I watched was a 2019 drama horror sci-fi, a movie by the name of The Silence, and it's available on Netflix. Here's the plot. When the world is under attack from terrifying creatures who hunt their prey by sound, 16-year-old Allie Andrews, who lost her hearing at 13, and her family seek refuge in a remote haven. Now, I thought this movie was decent, but nothing really surprised me about it, and I did end up giving it a 6 out of 10. Here's my review. The Silence is a decent little horror movie. It's got a good cast, big budget, and decent acting. Big budget means the creatures in this movie look decent and not too cheesy, and they were brutal in some scenes where they really tore their victims apart. Also, I really love these world disaster movies. I literally get giddy when I see scenes like where they turn on the TV and there's like a news broadcast and things are like going on outside and you can hear sirens crossing and it's just getting chaotic. And the trifecta, which I know it's going to be a good world disaster movie, is when you see some planes like falling out of the sky. I don't know, it just always sets the scene for something big and dramatic. Now, while I do love the elements that brought about the problems in this movie, I did find that it just was pretty cliche and predictable. The story isn't breaking any ground, and the situations don't break any ground either. I mean, you often see the character sacrifices coming, and you even kind of see the ending coming, with a very run-of-the-mill soliloquy of hope that the characters kind of say to themselves at the end. Honestly, that took the movie from being about a 6.5, but this is still a very watchable movie with a lot of good tension points. The next movie I watched was a 2024 drama horror mystery, a movie by the name of The Babadook, and it's available on Shudder and VOD digital. Here's the plot. A single mother and her child fall into a deep well of paranoia when an eerie children's book titled Mr. Babadook manifests in their home. Now, I thought this movie was a good to great creepy movie with some decent scares, so I did end up giving it a 7.5 out of 10. Here's my review. The Babadook is a good creepy movie. Throughout the movie, you most def get some good creeps and scares. The Babadook sounds and looks creepy in most of its scenes. The production is good and I really like the acting. Two of the things that stood out to me was the acting, but not from the kid, who is alright, but something about him almost just annoyed me. But I feel maybe his character was supposed to be played that way. But also, I really enjoyed the acting from the mother. You just get a good piece of grief and depression acting in this movie. She plays exasperation and exhaustion so well in this movie that you actually start to feel for her by the end of it. She gets so frustrated with her son, which I felt that same frustration, that by the end, her slip and psychotic break that we see almost feels real. The other part that I really enjoyed about this movie was the depression subtext that you get throughout the story. It just feels very visceral, and watching it critically, I wondered how much of the film represented the main character's struggle with depression. All in all, it's a good movie that's worth the watch, and a movie I'd own. The next movie I watched was a 2024 straight horror called Lowlifes, and it's available on Crave. Here's the plot. The survival instincts of a road-tripping family are put to the test when they have no other choice but to stay the night at a remote homestead. Now, Lowlife shocked me, and even the way that the story went kind of shocked me. I thought this was a good to great movie, and I did give it a 7.5 out of 10. Here's my review. Lowlifes is a good to great slasher film that has good production and acting. It's quick to start, and it really doesn't let up from there. The characters have a good smart dialogue, and I thought some of the plot elements in this one were great. It's got a pretty unique premise, and its direction keeps you guessing till the very end. It's got great gore and some absolutely brutal kills, and even one hard to watch part that made me wince. All in all, I recommend this movie and I could see it in my collection. Now, the next movie I watched was a 2005 adventure horror thriller by the name of The Descent, and this movie is available on Amazon Prime and VOD Digital. Here's the plot. A caving expedition goes horribly wrong as the explorers become trapped and ultimately pursued by a strange breed of predators. Now, this is a good classic horror movie filled with tons of jump scares, and I gave this movie a 7 out of 10. Here's my review. The Descent is a really good adventure horror that stands the test of time. It's acted well and has a good circle of friends element to the story. Not only do you get a lot of tension through the creature scenes, but you also get a lot of good survival tension and claustrophobia as well. The story has great twists and turns, and you get a good amount of gore, and even some gross moments that made me wince. It's got good jump scares, and the only thing it really lacks on is creepy. Even though it's a little older at this point, it is still definitely worth the watch. The next movie I watched was a 2011 horror thriller called Silent House, and this movie is available on Amazon Prime and VOD Digital. Here's the plot. A girl is trapped inside her family's lakeside retreat and becomes unable to contact the outside world as supernatural forces haunt the house with mysterious energy and consequences. Now, I thought this movie was a good, creepy movie, and I did give it a 7 out of 10. Here's my review. Silent House is a good, creepy movie. Elizabeth Olsen is good in it, which helped the movie because it has a lot of crisis and panic acting. It's filmed as one continuous shot, which, I mean, is really good. It's really well done, but you can sometimes see the transitions and stitches. I don't know, whenever I hear a movie is filmed in one continuous shot, I always make it a challenge to find where those stitches are, because I just like to discover the cut points. Now, even if you find them, which isn't hard, it still doesn't take away from the fact that you were watching 88 straight minutes, which gave it a very found footage quality and really added to the scares and tension. The plot is good, and I enjoyed the direction of the story that isn't only engaging, but builds a good mystery throughout the movie. Now, it's inspired by true events, which could mean anything, but it does add to the mystique of the film. All in all, this is a good movie with good creeps and jump scares. It's an underrated movie in my opinion, and you should give it a watch for sure. The next movie I watched was a 2022 drama horror called Huesera, the Bone Woman, and this movie is available on Shudder, AMC Plus, and VOD Digital. Here's the plot. Valeria has long dreamed about becoming a mother. After learning that she's pregnant, she expects to feel happy, yet something is off. Now, this movie is pretty decent, but it definitely fits kind of that slower drama horror element, so I gave this movie a 6 out of 10. Here's my review. Huesera, the Bone Woman is an interesting horror movie. It definitely fits the mold of a drama horror as you're getting almost all character development and minimal scares. There is some disturbing imagery, and I did enjoy where the main character went, but again, it was just a little too slow for my tastes. The story was good enough and it was well acted. There are some scenes that build up the dread and horror, but I just didn't feel like there was enough of them. If you want something character-based and a little more cerebral, then this film might be worth the watch. Now, the next movie I watched was a 2024 straight horror called The Strangers Chapter 1, and this one's available on VOD Digital. Here's the plot. After their car breaks down in an eerie small town, a young couple is forced to spend the night in a remote cabin. Panic ensues as they are terrorized by 3 masked strangers who strike with no mercy and seemingly no motive. Now, I did feel like this movie, while it wasn't exactly really good, I do think it kind of got a bit of a bad rap, and I do think that people are giving it a lot lower scores than it deserves, but I did end up giving this movie a 5.5. Here's my review. I'm not sure why this movie gets such a bad rap. I mean, I thought it was a decent movie and had some good intention, so in that regard, I found it quite effective. Now, it didn't have traditional creeps and scares, but it did have a lot of decent close calls. One of the drawbacks of the film is I felt that it had quite a few almost throwaway plot points, and that this movie was entirely unremarkable. At some points, even though this is a franchise, I feel like I could have thrown it on, and I almost wouldn't even know what I was watching. I mean, once I saw the mask, I get it, but shit, this movie could be The Purge or any number of slashers, and there wasn't nearly enough kills. I also didn't really find its conclusion satisfying enough. It's not a bad popcorn movie, but it feels almost thrillerish. People like to say that it's not as scary as the first one, but again, I barely thought that movie was scary as home invasion doesn't really tend to scare me, so I just felt like this movie was something to watch and nothing near a must watch. It definitely feels like a rehash of the original, and for that's why it just got a very meh score. The next movie I watched was a 2016 horror thriller by the name of Hush. And unfortunately, I had heard that this movie got taken off of Netflix, so I couldn't find where to watch this. So you might have to look for some weird streaming site or a physical copy. Here's the plot. A deaf and mute writer who retreated into the woods to live a solitary life must fight for her life in silence when a mass killer appears at her window. Now, I found Hush to be a great movie with great tension, so I did end up giving this movie a 7 out of 10. Here's my review. Hush is a good movie with great tension. It's got good production budget and the characters are well acted. One of the shining points of the movie for me is actually when the character has an aside with herself. It's just a really good moment. It doesn't have buckets of gore, but it's a good brutal fight with some definite painful and gory moments. This is also a good example of how good one-location movies can be if executed correctly. The motivation for the antagonist was lacking, but I'm trying to determine if that added or took away from the movie. Hush is a good tense movie that I suggest you watch. The next movie I watched was a 2023 straight horror film by the name of Pandemonium, and this one is available on VOD Digital. Here's the plot. After realizing he has died at the scene of a car crash, Nathan descends into the depths of hell, where he is doomed to experience the pain of tortured souls along the way. Now, Pandemonium is a decent to good movie that I thought was pretty heavy, and I did end up giving it a 6.5 out of 10. Here's my review. After watching Pandemonium, I thought this was a good heavy movie. It starts really strong, and I love the character interactions and the themes in the beginning. And I really wish they would have continued in that line. But once the movie moves into this light anthology, which is just what we'll call it, I feel like it takes a bit of a downturn from there. It's comprised of a couple stories, and while the first one was decent, the second one dragged a bit and lacked. Now let me add that these stories were all absolutely dark and had a great splash of twisted in them. It's just that you have to be a fan of these new bleak horror style movies, which I find is a genre that's becoming more and more prevalent. Now, I don't really mind heady movies like this, and I do like a dark, bleak movie, so bring it on. But in this case, it eventually held back the movie from being what could have been an 8. All in all, if you want something bleak and dark as opposed to traditional scares, I suggest you check out Pandemonium. The next movie I watched was a 2013 drama horror mystery, a movie by the name of Under the Skin, and this one is available on Netflix and VOD Digital. Here's the plot. A mysterious young woman seduces lonely men in the evening hours in Scotland. However, events lead her to begin a process of self-discovery. Now, even though Under the Skin is a slow burn and barely horror, I still actually kind of thought this movie was decent to good, and I did give it a 6.5 out of 10. Here's my review. Under the Skin is a decent to good movie. It's a slow burn, and to be honest, I'd say it's just barely a horror. I enjoyed the slow burn story, and the character's self-discovery was played really well by Scarlett Johansson. It built a good mystery and left just enough breadcrumbs to kind of piece together what was going on. And although it's more of an art house film for sure, I didn't find the movie to be overly abstract. If you enjoy drama horror, this one is worth a watch, but be warned, it is a slower burn for sure. Lastly, I watched a 2021 drama horror mystery, a movie by the name of False Positive, and this one is available on VOD Digital. Here's the plot. As if getting pregnant weren't complicated enough, Lucy sets out to uncover the unsettling truth about her family doctor. Now, False Positive was a decent watch, but nothing overly special, so I did give this movie a 6 out of 10. Here's my review. False Positive is a decent watch, but nothing special. It's an okay story, but it's such a slow burn at times. At least it builds a decent mystery that did keep us going with the theories, but one of my theories really hit it right on the nose, and plenty of my theories were super close, so I guess this movie is somewhat predictable in a sense. The performances and production were decent, and the movie was watchable. Well guys, that's going to do it for a huge episode of everything I watched. I know this was a longer one, but I did want to catch everybody up from the 2 months, and I do tend to watch a movie every second day, or I try to watch one every day, but there are a lot of days you get caught up with work or something like that, so I didn't really get to. It would be way hard for me to give you guys picks, so I'm just gonna give a blanket statement. If the movie is 7 or above, it definitely is worth the watch. That to me is a good movie. 6 is decent, so still worth the watch, but the 7s are the ones that I would like kind of watch immediately if you had to take some picks away from this one. If you actually made it this far through the video, thank you so much for watching. And if you did get some good titles that you never heard about for your movie watch list, please like and subscribe, as there's plenty more where that came from. I'm going to get out of here as I have got a ton of movies to watch. I hope you guys are well and take care of yourselves, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.